Yeah.
Anyway, Donald McNeil. Isn't that his name? Go ahead. What, you want to set it up or?
Yeah. He ends up having to resign because he referred to the N-word.
This is a science editor. Is he at the New York Times? I'm sorry, I don't know all the facts.
He had, especially last year, did really good work on the pandemic. He's 67, so he's had a long career.
Been there 40 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Decades, yeah. And his career ends with him leaving in disgrace because, you know, that cabal that seems to exist at the Times, these quote unquote young staffers, a letter signed by 150 people taking issue. And to be fair, not only with that word, but apparently he had said some things that go against the current orthodoxy in the past.
That word was the N word, which he used in describing someone else's use.
Right. So he
enunciated the N word, not on his own account, only by way of telling us what someone else had said.
Mm-hmm. And you know what I find? You know, we could go on a whole rant about, you know, certain people, et cetera. This is the thing that I take away from it. I wrote a piece. Anybody knows how I feel about that. I wrote it on Substack and I just made my case. And I was interested in the discussion of it because an awful lot of people, and I don't know whether this is willful. I hope it's willful because if it's real, it scares me. A lot of people really refuse to make the difference between the use of the word and referring to it, and insisted that I was saying that it was okay for white people to walk around using the N-word, as if I had just said, oh, come on, they can use it. Whereas I was making the more specific point that to refer to it is something which I vividly remember as late as the early 2000s was considered okay in polite company. You don't overdo it, but the idea that you cannot enunciate those sounds unless you're a black person using it to mean buddy, that was not the case even 20 years ago. Something has set in since then. And I was just saying that I think it's gone too far that somebody would get fired, which he essentially was, for that. And for a lot of people, it's clear. Talk about the emotion that all of this is processed with. This kind of the theme of this episode is that a lot of people reading what I wrote seem to really have thought that I meant that white people are supposed to be able to walk around saying the N-word all the time, whereas I meant, no, the issue of reference and had to specify. And this just shows that there are people who are spraying for heresy, and they're not all black in this case. We're really talking about that whole elect crowd. They're just waiting for it. They've got that spray bottle ready. And so somebody black says they shouldn't have been fired for referring to the N-word. And they're so angry. They are so tripwire set to explode at our heresy that they actually neglect to see that I'm making a more specific point than just the use of the word. That scares me. I don't believe that they don't understand the difference. They understand the difference. They're missing it because they're so very, very aroused. That's the sort of thing that we're dealing
with. Dean Baquet, the guy who runs the show over there at the New York Times, is reported to have said in the context of this Donald McNeil situation that his intent was irrelevant, or words to that effect. Doesn't matter what he meant. The fact is, it's intolerable that such utterances should take place because, I complete the sentence here, it's hurtful to other people. So the enunciation of the word in that context was hurtful. And the driving engine of the rebuke here is the feelings of people who heard the word uttered, not the intention of the person who spoke it. And in his mea culpa, Donald McNeil reinforces this. He should have been more sensitive. His fault was not so much the act itself, but the presumption which he took upon himself that he would be permitted to undertake the act, because he knows that he actually didn't mean any harm in so doing. But his ignorance of the possibility of the harm done by him speaking in this way is a defiling offense in and of itself. Now, that should that kind of behavior in a major institution of cultural production in this country should terrify all of us.
Yes.
You think it ends there? Witch huntery afoot. Just change the script. Suppose the country is at war and we're talking about something that somebody utters that's contrary to our consensual agreement about what the national interest might be. Suppose there's an attack on the Capitol and somebody wants to say that not everybody who was present there is equally guilty of the offense of having participated in an insurrection. Suppose there's an election and you actually like the guy who lost narrowly, but you happen to work in a university where people will be hurt by knowing that one of their teachers, how could you expect them to sit comfortably in the classroom when they know they're being taught by somebody who's... Do you people not see what's at stake here on the slippery slope that we're standing on as we slide into something that is undemocratic, that is anti-intellectual, that is tyrannical? Now, a lot of people are going to get exercised just because I'm exercised about this. Because cancel culture is a trope that right-wingers are using in order to tamp down social justice advocacy. I'm fighting for the foundation of our civilization here.
And there's something else. And we need to talk about this at more length in another show.
Good.
This argument that it's not the intent, it's the impact is treated as a mic drop, but it isn't. Because everybody knows that the next question is, why does it have that impact? And in some cases, there's no point in dwelling on it. But in this case, the idea that if you even use the N-word in reference, Black people are injured and are supposed to fall to pieces, that's rather new. And it doesn't necessarily make sense. And so, okay, that's now the impact. In other words, there's been a kind of an informal decision that that's the impact now. But no, it does make sense to ask why. If a white person asks that, we're now supposed to push them out a window. Okay, well, if I'm Black, I mean, maybe you're just going to push me on the windowsill and threaten me a little bit. So I'm going to say, why? Why that? Now, it's one thing to have a pox on the use of the N-word. That's fine. I'm not saying that there was something wrong with that. Why would I? I know there are people listening to this who actually are wondering, is he? No. However, to use the N-word in reference, why in the world would we let white people have that kind of power? So the idea that is that if somebody refers to the word one time, or let's face it, these days says something in Chinese that sounds like the word, as actually happened at the University of Southern California, or uses it in expurgation on a test, well, then everybody is supposed to fall to pieces. Why allow white people that power? And remember,
people need to know that when you say in expurgation, that means in asterisk, 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 asterisk.
Right. Why allow them that power? Now, why allow them the power in terms of just aiming the word at us? Sure, I get that. There's no argument necessary. But the things that we're talking about today, McNeil, the expurgation, the Mandarin, why are we allowing white people to have that kind of power over us? Because frankly, you talk about self-hating. To me, that looks like people with low senses of self-esteem. And if the idea is to say, yes, we have low senses of self-esteem because white people have been beating all over us, then I ask you to consider whether or not that's a little bit pathological. And yes, this time I do mean it. If that's how you feel, I think you need to seek therapy or counseling. Aren't we supposed to be a proud people? Now, proud people say you better not use that word against us, sure. But does a proud people fire Donald McNeil because he referred to the word, as opposed to maybe giving him a slap on the wrist, if you must do that? But why does that man's career have to end in disgrace because of that? It's as if we don't like ourselves. I find it to be a performed delicacy, and I wish that people would stop it.
I love that. I love that performed delicacy. That's very brilliant. It maybe should be the last word, but I've got to add this as a man in my 70s, to have worked at an institution for 40 plus years and to then have been discarded like a soiled piece of toilet paper for uttering a word. That's contemptible. Yes. Okay, that's a labor relations point. Working people would understand it. People who belong to unions would understand it. What kind of loyalty is that? You discard that man and you besmirch him as a bigot after he's given his whole life to your organization? That sickens me.
I agree. That's how it makes me feel too.